Welcome to Season 3 of Voices of Australia, where we embark on a journey through the heart of social cohesion. In this thought-provoking podcast series, we delve into the diverse tapestry of Australian society, weaving together the stories, experiences and perspectives that contribute to our nation's unity. From conversations with community leaders and experts in their fields, to personal narratives of everyday Australians, Voices of Australia Series 3 explores the challenges and triumphs of fostering social cohesion in a dynamic and ever-evolving society. Whether you're a seasoned advocate for social harmony or just beginning to explore the nuances of Australian identity, this podcast invites you to listen, learn and engage in the vital dialogue surrounding social cohesion. Our guest today is Emma Kearney, the only player to be named an All-Australian in every season of the AFLW's existence. Emma Kearney is not only one of the greatest players in the history of the game, she's one of the greatest captains too. Named skipper of the inaugural Kangaroos side, Emma forged her reputation on being one of the hardest and most ferocious players going around, and as the competition has improved year in, year out, so has she. Although the Roos were cruelly denied the ultimate prize, Emma became the first player in North Melbourne history to captain the club in an AFLW Grand Final. She was awarded an historic 8th All-Australian Blazer following the preliminary final win over Adelaide and claimed 3rd place at the club's best and fairest night. Emma is also a development coach for the men's North Melbourne football team. In addition to her incredible AFL achievements, Emma came from an education background, having worked as a secondary school teacher for 6 years before moving to the North Melbourne's community arm team, the Huddle. There she led the education team for 3 years, helping design and implement True North and Voice Your Voice education programs, which are delivered to local schools to help build resilience and greater understanding of self. Hi Emma, how are you?
Very good, Anthea. How are you going?
I'm doing just fine, thanks very much. And it's absolutely terrific to have you here. And congratulations on your most recent role of becoming one of the AFL men's programs player development coordinators. I think this is just such an outstanding opportunity, but one that's quite rare in the football world. So was it something that came as a bit of a surprise, or was it one that you had always hoped to take on?
I think I always wanted to get into coaching post my playing career. Obviously, I'm still playing, but there was an opportunity that came up through the AFL scholarships. So they were able to award clubs scholarships to get more women involved in coaching, and North Melbourne were a recipient of that. And so we were fortunate that there was a role coming up to work under Alistair Clarkson in the men's program, and the club nominated me to be that person. So I took the opportunity with both hands. I think for me, I'm always a person that says yes to opportunities. Whether I know what I'm getting myself into is another story, but I feel like I can navigate my way through it if I like it or if I don't like it. If I'm closing the door to opportunities, then they may not open up again for me. So I'm loving the challenge. It is very unique in that I'm the only woman involved in the coaching team at the club in the men's program. So, it is a male-dominated field, but I'm hoping that by me being a role model for other women in the industry, we can soon have a lot more women involved in the men's program and coaching as a whole.
Well, absolutely. But you are extraordinarily well qualified for the role. I mean, the mere fact that that you're a qualified teacher and that you've been the head of education at the Huddle, these are really terrific skills to bring to this type of a role. And there are many who take on coaching roles that haven't had any experience, let alone training, in what it takes to actually be somebody that can educate others.
Yeah, I think to your point, there's always doubt, and like it seems to always happen a lot with women in that if they don't fit certain criteria, if it's 1 or 2 criteria, they go, I'm not qualified for the job. And there was times where I was like, oh, I'm not sure if I'm suited for this role. But to what you've just said, I've had great experiences being a teacher, and coaching's got very good transferable skills in that we're there to educate the players, and we can do that in a really engaging way. I've taught in classrooms. I've worked with the Huddle with this generation of young people, which are no dissimilar to our playing group. We've got a really young group, so there are different ways that you can educate them to engage. Technology's our greatest friend because, as we know, we're always on our devices. So if we can use that as an engaging tool to try to help educate the players and just even trying to ask some questions so then they're taking responsibility for the learning as opposed to just the coach up the front doing the talking. So there's certainly lots of skills that I've learned in teaching that have really helped me in my coaching career so far.
It is an interesting area. I mean, if we just reflect a little bit on the work that you did at the Huddle, the Huddle is very much about community engagement and how to assist others to be able to be the best they can be from an educational perspective, but also to do it in a really inclusive fashion. What were the sorts of learnings that you had during your time at the Huddle as to how that really does make a contribution to how people have a sense of belonging within their, not only their local neighbourhoods, but in actual fact to their thinking about being part of an Australian identity?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest thing that I took away from my work at the Huddle is the relationships are really important, and that the communities that we worked in, there's sometimes a bit of trust issues, particularly as an external provider that would come into schools or come into community groups when they weren't familiar with you. So for me, it was really important that I established really close relationships with young people. I would really encourage the positive behaviours that they would exhibit and reward those behaviours. And it's probably no dissimilar to the work that I'm doing now at the footy club as a coach, in that the relationship, you've got to have really strong relationships. The players are more than just footballers. They're people first, and then they're footballers second. And if you can really connect with them on that personal level, get a deeper understanding of who they are, how they tick, how they learn best, then that's going to help you with your coaching and help them as well as on the footy field. So I think for me it was just around establishing those really close relationships and getting an understanding of who they are and I guess developing a greater sense of empathy for those people.
It's such an interesting thing, isn't it? Because that's something that is possible at a face-to-face, person-to-person type level. But when you're looking at a club or a league overall that has really developed quite strong aspects of the Australian identity are caught up in sport, if you like. So that how do you build that trust relationship with communities overall when you're a system or an institution like the AFL is? Do you have some thoughts? Because they have gone through a number of different machinations about different ways of being able to build those relationships from the ground up. Do you think that have you seen examples of how this has been particularly effective from the AFL's perspective?
Yeah, the AFL's still got a long way to go in this space, but I think like events such as Indigenous Round, it's a really good opportunity for us to celebrate our great Indigenous culture. But I think, and similar to the Pride Round, we have a Pride Round in AFLW. We're yet to have one in the men's. They do have a Pride game between St Kilda and Sydney. Those are great opportunities to start conversations. The problem that I sort of have with those is that we have these great rounds and we celebrate the culture, but then it stops after those rounds. So I think it's about continuing to make sure that the AFL is a really inclusive environment for all types of people, not just the white heterosexual players that are playing. It is an amazing sport. It's for all shapes and sizes, but we still need to work on educating everyone and making sure that the environment is really safe for everyone. So, yes, it's probably great examples, but I still think that we can continue to do better.
So if the AFL creates these very symbolic opportunities to demonstrate that they're committed to inclusion, do you think the clubs then have a responsibility to try and carry that forward in the way that they behave? And have you seen that at North Melbourne?
Oh, absolutely. It can't just come down from top down. It has to be filtered through to the clubs. And I think North Melbourne, particularly where it's positioned in a suburban, near the high-rise commission flats, where there is a high proportion of multicultural Australians living in those areas. So we've got a really great opportunity to really grow our footprint as a football club and service those communities. And we do that through the huddle. We work amazingly well in the Wyndham area, which has a high proportion of Indian and Pacific Islander people. So traditionally they're into their cricket or their rugby. So, we're trying to influence them into the football pathways, which can have its challenges, but the fact that we've got a really established brand out there has been really handy. And then likely in the Flemington, Ascot Vale, North Melbourne area, again, a really highly multicultural area. And, we're trying to, grow our football club. We're a very small supporter base, but we feel like we've got a great opportunities to sort of grow our fan base with that growing community there. And probably an example of that is on the weekend, we had a welcome to AFL session. So we had over 100 people go on to Marvel Stadium before the game yesterday, and they learnt the rules of the game and tried to have a greater understanding of Australian football. And if you live in Victoria, you know that football is such a big part of the culture of the city or the culture of the state. You often rock up to work on a Monday and people go, "Oh, did you watch the footy?" or "How did such and such go?" Or you talk about your tips or whatever it is. So for those people that go to those welcome to AFLs and they get a greater understanding of the game, they feel like they've got a greater sense of belonging within their community.
The North Melbourne has had quite a long history of it's formalising its engagement with local communities. Other clubs have really struggled a bit more in connecting or at least convincing people to build an alliance with the AFL as well as other sports that they might have, particularly in other states. What advice would you give based on that long history of experience at North Melbourne to other clubs in how they should go about starting to build those sort of passionate cohorts within the other states and perhaps allow them to have more than one sport that they're passionate about?
Yeah, well, I suppose the advice or what I would say to those clubs is, why aren't they doing it? It's a great opportunity where we're tremendous role models and we're such big brands, football clubs are. So if we can have an impact in the community, that's huge. I would say that North Melbourne are leading the way in that space, and there are other clubs that do it quite well as well. But there's so many barriers to participation in sport, cost being one and facilities probably being another one. So if we can try to minimise those barriers and getting more people involved in sport, it's only going to be a really positive thing for the growth of the game. We're seeing more and more women playing AFLW just because the league started 7 years ago. But, we've got more and more people that are probably leaning towards the soccer space for a variety of reasons, and we'd love for them to start playing footy instead. So if we can do little things in the community, like North Melbourne are doing, to try to engage young people, then I think it's going to be a great thing for the sport to get more people from multicultural backgrounds playing our great game.
So for many people, particularly from an AFL perspective, getting into connections with young people makes a lot of sense because they want to develop them not only into passionate supporters, but also potentially future players. So that's sort of a very logical connection. But I think one of the things that you understand very clearly is how important it is to get families and parents on side and allow them to understand the contribution that sport makes to an individual's growth and education. One of the things I think that a lot of people perhaps don't think through is that some particular parents don't necessarily feel that sport is a component of their education. They might see it as a distraction. Have you got any thoughts about how to engage with that sort of that intergenerational engagement, if you like, over time?
Yeah, I think probably from my experience, a lot of the young people that I've worked with, their parents have migrated to Australia, so they're sometimes, and this is not always the case, but sometimes there's a language barrier between, and so that young person, because one, they're trying to find their own identity. They're sort of like, they've got their identity at school, which is like sort of that traditional Australian sort of identity, but then when they go home, it's, whatever background they're from, like maybe Somalian or Ethiopian or whatever it is that they're trying to fit into as well. So it can be really tricky for them. But also when they've migrated to Australia, they've always thought, well, education is the most important thing to them. It's almost like the only thing that will help their children be as successful as they can. So I think for us, in terms of our role, it's trying to educate the parents. Well, one, it comes down to the relationships that you create with those parents and those families, but it's also educating them in terms of the benefits of sport and how that actually can help with their study. We always know that, like, the more healthy, active, socially active the young people are, the benefits that can have on their, concentration, their willingness to study and things like that. So, just making sure that, they're aware of those benefits of that. But also, I think for us is providing them, and this is what we do really well at the club, is providing them with a space where they can do some physical activity, but then there's also a really nice quiet space where they can do their study. So they're actually ticking off both elements at the footy club in our little huddle space that we have.
Yeah, you're a really wonderful example, though, of somebody that highlights the range of different career opportunities that exist in sport. So for a lot of people, they think that sport is all about either watching it or potentially playing in it, but not necessarily thinking of the whole universe of other roles that exist in and around sport that require all sorts of educational backgrounds, from maths to science to engineering. And there are, such a variety of different roles, whether you're a physiotherapist or you're, the person capturing the data that helps the players understand how to improve whatever particular components they're doing, or whether you're a coach. All of these roles sit in and around sport, but we often just tend to think about it as sport is something you either watch or it's something that you go and kick a ball around. And maybe if you're absolutely lucky, you might become one of the elite that actually goes on to have that as a career. But there are so many other roles that sit in and around it. And that sort of better understanding that relationship of sport as a sector for education helps to build a greater sense of belonging as to why sport is important within a community.
Yeah, you're 100% right, because I think for me, growing up, I always just wanted to play elite level sport. And probably from an outsider's perspective, you think of a footy club as the coach, the players, and maybe like the fitness staff, and that's sort of it. But there is so much that makes up footy team. We've got people that work in membership. We've got our analysts. We've got our sports scientists. We've got people in the media team, so they're really good with the social media skills. They're great at writing. There's a role to fit anyone's interests. So, yeah, I think for me, it's highlighting to young people when they are looking, when they say, oh, I want to work in a footy club, it's like trying to understand, okay, what is it that you actually really want to do? And I suppose as a teacher, there's always students that I would be like, oh, what do you want to do when you're older? Oh, I want to play elite level soccer, or I want to play elite level basketball. It's like, okay, yep, that's good goal, but how else can you sport, and I suppose they didn't really understand the different roles within that. And then so for me, just highlighting those different roles, it was a bit eye-opening. And there's one student that I work with and I still keep in contact with, and he's working quite high level in the NBA now, just based on his connections that he was able to make through school, but then also just through his playing days, even if it was just community level, but then just through work experience and things like that.
You grew up in the country, so what was the role of sport within the country and providing young people with a sense of belonging to their communities?
Yeah, sport in country Victoria is like the biggest part of the culture there. So on a Saturday morning, the girls are generally playing the netball and the boys are playing the football. For me, I didn't like netball. I didn't play football because I was a girl, so I played hockey. But it was still part of the big culture of growing up. And I think for me, I was someone that like had a lot of friends, but I wouldn't say that I was like super close with anyone. So I sort of, I guess that sense of belonging I didn't really have at school as much, particularly in my teenage years. And for me, the greatest sense of belonging that I had was when I was on the sporting field, because I was really good at. It was something that I absolutely loved, and the teammates that I had, I got along really well with. It wasn't necessarily something that I had at school. I tried really hard at school. It wasn't my strong suit, but I still did okay. But certainly from a sporting point of view, definitely, playing sport gave me the greatest sense of belonging. But in also, I was the only girl that was playing. So I played cricket when I was in my teenage year. I was the only girl that was playing. So I was playing with my dad and with my brothers and all these other men or boys. And yeah, I suppose I loved it, but I definitely wouldn't think that I had a greater sense of belonging there because I was different from them. So I think for me, when I came to Melbourne and I was playing in an all-girls team and then I started playing football, I reckon that was when I finally found my people.
Well, Emma, what do you think was the difference between a cricket team and the football team? Because in some respects, forgive me because I don't know the sports that well enough to probably to make this generalisation, but cricket in some respects can be quite an individual sport, as in you're not in the same way that football where you're actually all having to coordinate with each other. So cricket is you're either batting at one end or the other, or you're standing out there in the field waiting for something to happen. Is that true, or am I completely on the off the charts?
Say that cricket is the most individualised team sport, and so I think the main difference is I love both sports, and the connections that I got from the relationships I was able to build from both sports were just equally as good. But in terms of the playing element, you're right. Cricket always felt like it was you against. So I was more of a bowler. It was you against the batter, and there was an element of that team, like your team's behind you, but it sort of wasn't. Whereas when you're at take the football field, and you know that you're backing back into a pack where you're about to pick up a ground ball, you've got your 15 other girls around you that are screaming, you're right. Whatever it might be, the encouragement that you get from them is far different in football than it was in cricket. And that's probably why I ended up retiring or giving away cricket, because I felt there was a lot of pressure in that individualised type of thing, and it wasn't so me. It's like you make a mistake in cricket, it could mean that you're out, or you've been hit for a couple of boundaries, sixes, fours, whatever it is. So for me, if you make a mistake in football, it's really quick to make it up. Whereas, cricket is different.
So, it's great to see how football is so inclusive in that way, but also really collaborative. So every individual has a role and you have to be playing that role throughout the entire game. From sort of, if we zoom out, if you like, when you think about the Matildas or the Olympics or the Ashes or whatever, these sorts of things tend to bring people as a population together. People tend to come together and really root for any one of those particular teams or groups. It has a very cohesive role, or a role in building that social cohesion. What do you think it is about sport that can bring populations together?
Yeah, I don't know. Sport doesn't have a language. And so you see, particularly, like, I would say that the Matildas was a great example of that in the recent World Cup, in that people want to feel involved in something. We want to belong. And so, yeah, getting behind the Matildas, people wanted to be at the games, or they wanted to be at Fed Square and watching, and they want to be cheering when they score a goal and things like that. So I think it just comes down to the fact that people want to fit in, people want to belong, and sport can do that. We saw, 80,000 plus people at the women's T20 World Cup. I think women's sport is starting to become that thing where people don't want to miss out on it because it's starting to get great momentum. Mm-hmm. And so I was fortunate that I was able to get to that game, and it was just before we had all the lockdowns. But it was like the most incredible sporting experience that I've seen live ever before, because I used to play, cricket. And I didn't play for the Australian team, but played for Victoria, and we would only get probably your family and friends. So to almost see 80,000+ people there watching was just an incredible experience. So I think for me, sport just plays that role in that doesn't matter what language you speak, people can still understand the sport, and particularly our world game in terms of soccer. It's such an amazing sport to watch and feel involved with.
Yeah, it is amazing. It's but simply the role that sport plays in Australia and the Australian identity, and how that brings people together around a particular outcome or a particular event is really quite profound, and has always been the case. That whether it's the swimming in the Olympics or whatever it might be, there have always been those moments that seem to have galvanised people. If you were to be sort of Prime Minister for a day, if you like, or certainly in a government role, what would you perhaps encourage them to do when it comes to leveraging sport for building social cohesion?
Yeah, I'd probably try to reduce the costs of sport. Probably one of the greatest barriers for people. Like, I never came from money. My dad is a farmer. My mum was a nurse. My parents raised 4 kids under 4, and so we never had money. I am just completely blown away how they were able to afford all us 4 kids through education, but also through sport. I mean, I played about 4 different sports growing up. And so I just think there must be so many young people that just have no opportunities to play, and we're probably missing out on so much talent. I just think of the remote communities within Northern Territory or WA, and the talent that we're probably not capturing because of lack of facilities, lack of resource, the costs involved in playing. So for me, I think I would fund a lot more sports to get more people involved. Plus, the benefits of being physically active. One, it reduces antisocial behaviours, but also the health benefits, mental health. Being active and being confident in your body, confident in your mind. I mean, that reduces then the costs of all the the mental health schemes, and the costs of doctors and stuff that we're all those all those things. So I think for me, if we can try to reduce the barriers so we're getting more people involved in sport, I think that's really positive thing, particularly for our remote communities.
Yeah, thank you. Well, even remote communities, but even just in the local areas, oftentimes clubs forget about the ones that are just living around the corner. But the opportunity to go and actually visit them and talk to their parents or talk to them and give them the opportunity to come by and try something. You're absolutely right. Emma, I do want to say thank you, but also I completely understand why you're such a great educator, is because you're incredibly clear, and it's really wonderful to talk to you about the power of sport when it comes to social cohesion. So thank you very much for spending this time with us.
No worries. Thank you for having me. It's two things that I really love. It's sport and social cohesion, and making sure that everyone has an opportunity to be physically active. So no, thank you very much for the chat.
Not at all. I think you've given people some really practical advice about what they can do, whether they're individuals thinking about it or whether they work for clubs or for the AFL. So we really appreciate that. So thanks very much.
No problems. Thanks very much, Anthea.
Thank you for listening to our Voices of Australia podcast. For more episodes like this one, you can visit the Scanlon Institute website at scanloninstitute, or one word, .org.au.